Chorja is mór an ordam a bheith an seo, live inacht chan an irisleir seo a cheola. Irisleir a thugan cuine ais don na daoine I bhí agus atá ina gcónaí agus ag gobar sa tír áling seo. When I was asked to launch volume 22 of this journal, I asked for an advanced copy and I read every word carefully. And what I found was something I didn't entirely expect, because while this is a collection of separate articles, it's also an illustration in one volume of what it means to pay careful attention to one particular place over a very long stretch of time. I write Roaringwater Journal, and those of you who read it will know that my particular preoccupation is this corner of West Cork. It's landscape, it's archaeology, it's almost impossible density of history per square mile. So perhaps I was disposed to think about the volume in this way, but I don't think so. Let me start at the beginning with Eugene McSweeney's account of the land war in Ballydehob and the visit of Anna Parnell. Anna Parnell, Eugene calls her Ireland's first militant female activist, co-founder of the Ladies' Land League, and by many accounts more radical than her brother Charles ever intended. In March 1881, she arrived at Skibbereen Station to what the Skibbereen Eagle called a surging sea of humanity. She was escorted by a procession of horsemen and a brass band to Ballydehob and addressed 4,000 people from the top of a rock, the platform having collapsed, with characteristic wit and purpose. Now, not long after, the Battle of Staball Hill followed. Marine, gunboats, riflemen, a community in open defiance of an empire. Eugene McSweeney is a great storyteller, and he draws on diaries, RIC reports, and the Skibbereen Eagle's vivid dispatches to bring that moment back to life. Now, if you've been at the Ballydehob Jazz Festival in recent years, you'll have stood in those same streets and watched enormous crowds gather in celebration, the whole village alive with excitement and music. Two very different kinds of gatherings, separated by a century and a half. But what connects them, I think, is something about this place. Its capacity to be a lightning rod, to draw people together around something that matters. Eugene's article is a reminder that Ballydehob's gift for collective energy has very deep roots indeed. Rachel Julia Barrett's Browhead Signal Station charts its long history and its malicious destruction in 1920. She's a London-based archive professional with family connections to Crookhaven, and her commitment to this particular headland is evident in every footnote. Then there's the companion piece, Leach's contemporary account of everyday life at the wireless station in Crookhaven. Now, after all the drama of Staball Hill and the Browhead destruction, my heart rate was up. And it was a relief to read about the quiet routines of a wireless station, the watches kept, the signals logged, the small texture of a working life at the edge of the Atlantic. But there's a moment in the middle of this journal that stopped me in my tracks. Michael Casey, where's Michael? Michael Casey, who many of you know, who grew up in Aberdown's, come home to it, has written about a man named Michael Sullivan. I actually worked on those same Poor Law volumes in the 1970s before moving to Canada. So meeting Michael Sullivan through Michael Casey's eyes felt surreal somehow, like the archive had come to life. In September 1844, 2 years before the worst of the famine, Sullivan gave evidence to the Devon Commission, the government inquiry into land and poverty in Ireland. He was the only labourer to do so in this area. When they asked him what he was, Michael Sullivan said, "I hold no ground. I am a poor man. I have nothing but my labour." 39 questions they asked him. He told them about his pig kept in the corner of the house because he couldn't afford a pigsty, and he wouldn't build one if he wasn't sure of the house for a second year. He told them his family ate nothing but dried potatoes, not a drop of milk. He described migrating to North Cork and Tipperary for harvest work, walking the whole way. Michael Casey searched for what became of him. After 1845, he found nothing. There is, he writes, a strong possibility that Michael Sullivan and his family perished in the famine. This is the kind of history this journal does. It finds the people whose lives are normally not recorded at all and insists on their full humanity. That same insistence runs through Terry Carney's piece on Dr. Dan Donovan, the dispensary doctor for the Skibbereen workhouse, whose eyewitness accounts of the famine went viral before the word existed, drawing donations from the Choctaw Nation in America to the Sultan of Turkey. And last year, the silver samovar presented to him by the townspeople of Skibbereen in 1859 came home from Canada 166 years later. Amazing. Patricia Coveney-Sears takes us from West Cork to London's East End, tracing the fate of the diaspora through the appalling conditions of the Victorian docklands. Infant mortality, insanitary housing, lives of unrelenting precariousness. The conclusion she draws is that the strength and resilience of our West Cork ancestors was remarkable, and perhaps most notably the women, working in poorly paid and dangerous conditions to keep their children housed and fed. Having survived on Gurtamore, they faced further losses in a world that was hard beyond reckoning. The sheer courage of those women. Like Anna Parnell and the women of Staball Hill with their apron full of stones, they deserve the remembrance they are recorded in this volume. Donald Corcoran's essay on the Irish Free State in 1926, At a Political Crossroads, contributes to what I think is a centenary thread running through this volume, which also surfaces in the happenings section with the release of the 1926 census. Ted Cadigan's Long Walk is something else entirely, a piece of living memory, warm and specific, about 16 men leaving Bantry on foot in October 1966, with their FCA boots and a small bundle under their arms, walking to Dublin to put the plight of rural Ireland before the government. Jim Morris from Ballydehob singing to keep their spirits up, a collie dog from Cavan walking the whole way. It's exactly the kind of material that needs to be written down before it's gone, and Ted has done it justice. The fiery orator who led the march, Rickard DC, has a special Skibbereen connection. He was the first cousin, once removed, of our own Agnes Clark, the 19th century astronomer, whose mother was Catherine DC from Clonakilty, and whose father was the manager of the provincial bank on Bridge Street. Caught Plamian's essay on the rural ideal in the writings of Peadar O'Hanrahan brings the Irish language into the scholarly frame. Fitting, given that this journal has this year appointed Maura Cahalan as its first Sanoli Gaelga, an Irish language advisor with the aim of opening its pages to articles in Irish or in both languages. This corner of West Cork was Irish speaking until the latter part of the 19th century. The language is in the place names, in the family names, in the land itself. I found it immensely sad that Peadar O'Hanrahan had to fight to master Irish, even though his own parents spoke it. And I was so struck by the irony of how, having extolled the beauty of the rural life in the manner of a romantic nationalist, that same rural life kept him from accessing the education and the opportunities he so deserved. Con Manning, a distinguished archaeologist and medievalist, and friend of mine, and past president of the Royal Society of Antiquaries of Ireland, saw on a walk on Shirkin what most of us would have missed. And he didn't rest until he figured out what he was looking at. A place where a mill, driven by the tides, once ground grain for an island community. It's difficult to date, but it could be as early as the 7th century, like the one in Nendrum, County Down. Mary McCarthy's poem, Winter 1947, is the journal's single lyric voice this year, and a reminder that not all history is prose. Philip O'Regan lays out 2 centuries of a building that's been at the centre of this town's life. Philip's article also explains to us how a town can have a cathedral, but not a bishop. Just one example of the convolutions of Irish history. Bill Wolfendale comes from Massachusetts to trace his family back to the townland of Drummig, to Michael Donovan and Mary Leary, who left during the famine to a farmhouse that is still standing. The genealogical patience required is extraordinary, tracking a fairly common name across 7 generations through famine, emigration, and the silences in the record. Like Patricia Sears' article on the Irish in London's East End, that is the diaspora returning through scholarship, and it matters. And it also contributes to another theme running through this issue: resilience in the face of poverty and hardship, and the indomitable spirit of the people of West Cork. And I think Sonia Bidwell is with us tonight. Hers is the farmhouse pictured on page 191.
Thank you.
I want to end with something that stayed with me since I read this journal. Father Charles Davis is largely forgotten today outside West Cork. He was a native of Skibbereen who spent his life in service to his people, building Baltimore Pier, establishing the loan system that put fishing boats in the hands of the men who crewed them, founding the Baltimore Fishing School, lobbying in London for 6 weeks to secure the railway to Baltimore. A man described at his death in 1892 as no ordinary clergyman, no ordinary man. His name was consigned to obscurity, not by anything he did, but by what others did long after him in an institution he had built with the best of intentions. Tracy Woodwolf's biography is an act of rescue, returning him to the record with the care and fairness he deserves. I have a small personal connection to this story, the Celtic cross erected in his memory at Radchurch. The photograph of it in the journal is mine from the Roaringwater Journal archive. And when I took that photograph, I was mostly struck by the fineness of the carving. And I knew vaguely that it commemorated a Father Davis who had founded the fishing school. Now I know what a man this was. And I want to end with a quote from his own speech, given in 1881 as part of a discussion about a Skibbereen and Baltimore Harbour Board. When Father Davis stood before the meeting, he spoke about this landscape in terms that I think you and this journal would recognize. He said, "We are in the midst of Carbery's 100 Isles, clad in a robe of verdure as green as the emerald. To raise Baltimore from its ruins, to allow even one ray of its former splendors to illuminate it, is a noble task. But it is a nobler task to revive a nation's industry, to spread plenty, comfort, and contentment among a peaceful and long-suffering people. These tasks we can accomplish by union and perseverance." A noble task, union and perseverance. These are fitting descriptors for a voluntary society that has now published 22 volumes of serious, careful, humane local history and archaeology. My congratulations to the editorial committee, to every one of the contributors whose work fills these pages. And I want to point out, if you haven't already noticed, the wonderful portrait over here, and you'll have to ask William for that story. It's also in the journal. And of course, I want to thank you, the readers and supporters, without whom none of this is possible. Is Evening Long on Irislauer Shah a Hiola Anacht. It's my great pleasure to launch volume 22 of the Skibbereen and District Historical Society Journal.